we're talking Masters of the Universe Revelation. This is a 5-part mini-series with the showrunner of Kevin Smith, made for Netflix. Now, it's important to note this is actually part 1 of the kind of this series. There's going to be another bunch of episodes which will be part 2. I don't know how many parts there will be. I think it might be just 2. And this is one of those kind of like Netflix anime style kind of series that they seem to be pumping out with increasing regularity. So this is going to be a little bit of a long one because I've got a lot to say about this. I've recorded this once already and it was way too long, so I'm going to try and do a truncated version. I want to talk about briefly where I am with He-Man. I was a huge fan of the original toys. I'm in that age group where I was the right age when the original He-Man cartoon came out. I collected the toys, I watched the TV show, I had the mini comics. You know, I wasn't so keen on the new adventures of He-Man that sort of came out afterwards, but I then really enjoyed the 2002 version, which I thought was excellent, and kind of did it a little bit more kind of, sort of take it a little bit more seriously, but a little bit more of a grown-up kind of cartoon. And obviously we had the live-action movie, which was kind of pretty forgettable. Now, I was a huge fan of He-Man, but I also like things like Transformers and G.I. Joe. G.I. Joe I liked as a kid, but I never really kind of followed the franchise outside of that. And Transformers became just too big. You know, there was too many iterations that I never really kept in kind of like up to date with it. So I like the original Transformers, the Generation 1 as it's known, but I've never really kind of like followed the franchise outside of that. Because He-Man has never been that expansive, it's been relatively easy to follow. Now, that's kind of where I am with He-Man, or the Master of the Universe franchise. And then we've got to talk a little bit about the kind of the controversy that surrounded this series, because it's become one of those kind of like pariah franchises that has been politicised and fought over by the culture wars. You know, we've got people from the left, and they're kind of saying, you know, they're praising it because it's trying to kind of be a little bit more inclusive and things like this, and have made certain choices within this kind of like this series that are different to what's gone before. Or we've got people that have clearly kind of been given kind of early release screeners and kind of like give us a good review. Or people that are just kind of being sycophants to kind of Kevin Smith and suck up to him. So that we have very overly positive reviews on one side, but on the other side we've kind of got like the right hand side, which are just like when anything that tries to be, let's call it woke, it just gets ripped apart before it even comes out. Now, I have my own political standings on this thing. I'm not going to tell you what they are because I don't want this channel to become political. But I feel that I can be objective and look at this property for what I think works and what I think doesn't, without kind of letting my political bias go one way or the other. But I do feel that it's like, it's very easy, and you see loads of these kind of videos that just trash this, very much like, and I agree with a lot of the kind of the criticisms, FYI, but, you know, things like the Star Wars, Ghostbusters, Star Trek, you know, Doctor Who. I mean, not that I watched all of that stuff, but they're all properties that have seemed to have become battlegrounds for the culture wars in pop culture. And now Master of the Universe has joined that kind of that conversation, which is a shame because things like Transformers and G.I. Joe seem to have escaped. But here we are. And what's the story? It's a 5-part series where, unlike the original TV show, the cartoons, it's not episodic, it is one overreaching plot. The bare bones synopsis is that through an event that happens, magic is disappearing from Eternia, and because Eternia in this universe is the centre of magic and it affects the whole universe, if the magic goes, pretty much it's the end of the universe. And it's up to a group of champions, which comprises of both heroes and villains now working together to try and bring back magic. Now, what will happen? You'll have to watch the series to find out. I'm not going to spoil any particular plot points here, but I do have to talk about some things that have been pretty much well publicised in the press and stuff, but it's no real spoilers, to be honest. But I want to talk about, first of all, what I think I liked about this movie, and then I'm going to come on to what I think does not work. So before I get into any of the political stuff, let me just kind of start with some other stuff. I do like the designs for the majority of the kind of the characters. I think this actually looks very good. The character design here, I think, for the most part, is excellent. I like the kind of the redesigns because they still keep that kind of classic look of the majority of the characters. Everyone is instantly recognisable in their kind of their, you know, they haven't changed anything, and in fact they've plussed up, I think, a lot of the kind of the characters. It does look quite similar in a way to the 2002 series. I don't think it looks a hell of a lot different from that, but that was, to be honest with you, they did the same thing. You know, it kind of updated the kind of the looks of the characters, and to me it really worked. I think the 2002 series was excellent, in my opinion. Although that was still somewhat episodic, whilst this one isn't. And that kind of modern storytelling of having more of an overreaching plot, I think, is the way to go, because that is the way that kind of these stories are told now. I think the episodic stuff is kind of days past somewhat, and people are more invested now in a kind of a journey that these kind of characters go on. So I do think that was the right move to have this as a more of a you know, a one plot ultimately, with a few kind of like, you know, departures kind of here and there. I really like the inclusion of a lot of classic mythology. You'll get like toy accurate versions of vehicles kind of whizzing around and stuff like that. We get a kind of a lot of the kind of the old minor characters or monsters like the Shadow Beast and things like that. They'll kind of make an appearance in the kind of the series, which I thought was good. It does introduce you to characters for the first time. For example, Scareglow was never in the original series because his toy sort of came out right at the kind of the end of the when Master of the Universe was kind of at its decline, really. So he was never really in the original series. And you know, it does actually make some characters, I think, make more interesting. Orko was a character I never liked in either the 80s or the 2002 version, but in this one, I've got to say, he's as interesting as he's ever been, and I could have quite liked his character here. And again, there's some stuff done here with some of the more minor characters. I quite like what they did with Tri-Klops especially, who in a way becomes like the kind of de facto main bad guy to a point. And I like the fact that he's embraced technology, which kind of makes sense because that was kind of more introduced in the sort of 2002 sort of series, and he's now, because magic is on the decline, he's ultimately seized power with kind of like a cult of technology, which I thought was good. He has a few sort of classic bad guys that are following him around as well. That I thought was all pretty good as well. And there's some choices that some of the characters make that I kind of quite appreciated. And I think the series ends. A lot of people don't like the ending. I actually quite liked it, to be honest. I thought it ended pretty strong. Like the last sort of 5 minutes, I'll say that was quite good. I thought. Now the thing that is going to be, let me do the positive kind of political stuff. I personally don't mind some of the kind of the changes that have been made here. I don't mind that they've race-bended King Grayskull or Andra, who were, again, not in the original series. They were kind of introduced later on and are minor kind of characters by comparison. I don't care. I thought it was fine to do that. That didn't worry me at all. And I think the characters were fine in this kind of this series. And a lot of people, again, these are the things that some of the people don't like. A lot of people don't like the fact that the female characters here are a lot more buff. To me, it makes sense. These are kind of like warrior women. It makes sense that they would be quite physically larger, you know, in regards to more muscular. It makes sense to me. It's one of the things I'm hoping with She-Hulk, for example, when the Marvel She-Hulk series comes up. I hope she's quite muscular, because it doesn't really make sense that they wouldn't be. So again, I kind of I don't mind the fact that there's some changes here to kind of like to modernise it, and you know, then again, there's some stuff that I do not like, which we're going to come on to. Anyway, let's talk about what maybe doesn't work for me. So again, before we get into the political stuff, which is going to be the real meat and bones of what I'm going to be talking about, there are some stuff here which I think don't work. The voice acting, with a couple of exceptions, I didn't really like a lot of the voice acting here for a number of different reasons. Some of them, Mark Hamill as Skeletor, just sounds like the Joker. You're looking at Skeletor, but you're hearing the Joker. Mark Hamill obviously doesn't have a lot of range as a voice actor. Kevin Conroy as Mer-Man is so different from any iteration as Mer-Man, and you're just hearing Batman. It doesn't fit the character. And there's other kind of performances here that either just don't suit the character, or they haven't used proper voice actors. They've used TV or film actors, which to me, I feel like a lot of the cast has gone up some silly 80s cartoon jobs. He-Man, they'll just kind of read the lines. To me, I felt a lot of the performances, and I'm going to include Sarah Michelle Gellar in this, were humdrum. Didn't feel particularly kind of engaged to me. There were a couple of exceptions. Lena Headey, I think, actually, although I still thought she started out pretty rough. Actually, by the end of it, I kind of quite liked. There's a couple here. Henry Rollins again as Tri-Klops, I thought was good. But a lot of the time, I just felt either the characters didn't really suit the voices that were coming out of them, or they were just too similar to other roles, or they just weren't fussed. The story structure for me had real problems. It's a 5-episode series, okay? Now, the first episode, to me, should have been expanded upon to maybe 3 episodes, because it's so condensed about what happens in the episode. This needed to be a reintroduction to this world, and so much happens in that first episode. It just feels like it's just skipped over, and that should have been expanded upon. And we should have given certain characters, and I'm including He-Man and Skeletor with this one, should have had time to breathe and been able to kind of be reintroduced to both the people who have watched it when they were kids, and now adults like myself, and kind of new audiences as well. Maybe for the people who are watching this kind of property for the first time. To me, that first episode was way too truncated, and then the remaining 4 episodes seemed way stretched out. Which outside of the second half of the last episode, it's basically a fetch quest, and it gets a bit boring. I won't lie. So the pacing here is pretty bad, and that's on Kevin Smith, because it's like way too kind of like condensed in the first episode, so you just feel like you're watching a very basic comic that needs to wrap up, and then it's just stretched out for the remaining 4. So there are some good elements within those 4 episodes, those last 4 episodes I liked, but it was a little bit dull, to be honest with you. I don't think the animation is the best. I've seen better animations from this kind of this animation house, and I'm not sure Kevin Smith really understands the property. He was a little older than me, so I felt like he's he was a bit too old for He-Man when he was younger, and was probably aware of it, but not really into it. Kevin Smith has always been a Star Wars guy, and I've never really, outside of when he was hired for this, I've never heard him discuss Master of the Universe. They should have got someone like James Eatock, I think, to be the showrunner here, or had like more of a kind of a writer's room. I don't think Kevin Smith was the best person. And let's be honest with you, Kevin Smith's work has been pretty bad between when he started. When he started was good. His stuff has got pretty poor. But then we got to talk about the political stuff. And okay, so this might sound like and I don't mean to sound misogynistic, because this might come across like that, but ultimately He-Man and Skeletor are very shortchanged in this series. They are barely in it, and instead, and this has been widely publicised, Teela, Andra, and Evil-Lyn are the main characters, particularly Teela, and so you've got a very much a female-led series, which has always been a boys toys. Yes, it's had female fans, but it's primarily made to sell boys toys. That's why they made She-Ra, because that was the female equivalent. Now, I don't really understand why you would make a female-centric He-Man show and then not make it a She-Ra show. If you wanted to have a female-led show, make it She-Ra. Let me put this a different way. He-Man has always been judged as the male version of Barbie. There was like, oh, you think I've seen a meme. You think Barbie gave you unrealistic expectations as a child? What about He-Man? So let's flip the kind of the script here. What if they made a Barbie series, but Barbie was only in the first episode and it followed Ken? Because that's the equivalent. So you see what I mean? That's the problem here. It's not as if I'm saying I don't want Teela in it or anything like that, and she shouldn't be a good character. But I don't think that there was a bait and switch here, and I don't think this is probably what people are wanting. Obviously, still have him in the kind of the show, and certainly maybe even have spotlight. Have an episode that focuses on Teela. But I think how they're having the whole show focus on it. I don't know if that was the smart play here. And the other thing to compound that, the character of Teela is they've made her particularly unlikable as a kind of a character here. I mean, I enjoyed the kind of the Evil-Lyn character, and I didn't even mind Andrew, to be honest with you. It was a kind of a relatively kind of, even though she was in like previous stuff, she's really in the forefront now. I thought she was okay. I'm not saying you can't have strong female characters in this show, but this franchise is really hinged on He-Man and Skeletor, and to sideline them, I thought was a bad move. Yes, I do think the kind of the benefit, if you like, is it does give other characters a little bit more kind of characterization, and I am all for that because I did like some of that. But I think it was a mistake to have it the Teela show, which is what this is. And I don't know if anyone was really ever wanting necessarily a Teela show, or at least not as the kind of the only show that exists, as a kind of a reboot, maybe a kind of a spin-off or something like that. Misjudged, I think. Again, so that's kind of where I stand on that. Like I said, I don't mind some of the other kind of stuff that was necessarily introduced that has been divisive, but to me, I just think the fans of this are probably. It's not necessarily what I would suggest a lot of fans want. The toneless one, I'm not quite sure who this is made for, because my initial thought was this is like an adult animation made for kind of like adults who grew up with this show, but it's kind of, it doesn't quite go to what I would consider adult animation or adult kind of tone. It still feels quite kiddie. The dialogue here is kind of hokey, to be honest with you. And a little bit kind of trite at times. It seems kind of not brilliant. I suspect, I have a feeling I know where this series is going to go in part 2. And if it does go there, whew, I'm not going to say what I think is going to happen, but yeah, that's going to be interesting. Overall, this might sound like a cop-out. I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10. It's pretty average. I don't think it's bad necessarily. I think there is some interesting things in it. I think it's a missed opportunity. I understand where Kevin Smith wanted to go, to take it in a different direction, and I do think that was a good idea, but this wasn't the direction. Or it needed to have more. As I said, the pacing should have been better, and it needed to have to be very, not that as different as it is to what came before it, I think. And I think some of the characters are misjudged. So it's a 5 out of 10 for me. It's not terrible. It's not a bad show necessarily, but it's a missed opportunity. The 2002 show, to me, is the best one. I still have nostalgia for the original, of course, but let's be honest, it was quite basic. The 2002 show was, to me, the best of this franchise, but unfortunately that was cancelled. So we'll see what happens to this. What did you think of it? There is quite a big couple of spoilers, so don't sort of say the spoilers. It's a 5 out of 10. Let me know what you thought. I'm interested to know. Bye for now.